chalice lighting words of Lucia this morning. They're in your order of service or on the screen, so please join me in reading them. Now,
who lights the chalice, the saints may say, we do, and may it shine bright on this day. For truth and in love, you use gathered here, to seek inspiration and faith without fear.
good morning. My name is Lucia. I'm a former member of the religious services team. Now I guess I'm considered an associate or something. If you've never been to church in a while, welcome back, first of all, and a bit of explanation. In the summer, we all often try to group our services around some sort of unifying theme. This summer, the theme is the books of Dr. Seuss. We've explored creative play through The Cat in the Hat, environmentalism through The Lorax, persistence and risk-taking through Green Eggs and Ham, and more. This week is our second to the last of the Gospel according to Seuss. We'll be sharing the story of Horton Hatches the Egg. Horton, a lovable and kind elephant, gets in a series of predicaments when he agrees to help out an acquaintance. We'll learn how he's an elephant of his word and what it means to be truthful and embody integrity. Now, given the events of this weekend, we could all do with a little lightheartedness. Horton's gentle nature and goofy smile will give us that. But his message goes deeper and will help us consider how we wish to embody integrity in our current world environment. Our first reading is, of course, from Horton Hatches the Egg. And please have your order of service visible, the cover of it visible to you, because you're going to be helping, and I will signal you when it's time to read the words. The story starts with Maisie, the bird, sitting on her egg. I'm tired and I've bored and I've kinks in my leg from just sitting here day after day. It's work. How I hate it. I'd much rather play. Maisie convinces Horton, a genial elephant, to sit on her egg while she takes a short break. Horton, quite heavy but ever practical, first props up the tree, then creeps up the tree to sit on the next. Then Horton the elephant smiled. Now that's that. And he sat, and he sat, and he sat, and he sat. And he sat all that day, and he kept the egg warm. And he sat all that night through a terrible storm. It poured and it lightened, it thundered, it rumbled. This isn't much fun, the poor elephant grumbled. I wish she'd come back because I'm cold and I'm wet. I hope that Maisie bird doesn't forget. But by this time, Maisie's short break had evolved into her permanent relocation to Palm Beach. So Horton kept sitting there day after day, and soon it was autumn. The leaves blew away. And then came the winter, the snow and the sleet, and icicles hung from his trunk and his feet. But Horton kept sitting and said with a sneeze, I'll stay on this egg, and I won't let it freeze. And here's your part. I meant what I said, and I said what I meant. An elephant's faithful 100%. Horton was then ridiculed by the other jungle animals. They laughed and they laughed. Then they all ran away. And Horton was lonely. He wanted to play. But he sat on the egg and continued to say, I meant what I said, and I said what I meant. An elephant's faithful 100%. No matter what happens, this egg must be tended. But poor Horton's troubles were far, far from ending. Hunters sneak up on Horton and point their rifles at his heart. Did he run? He did not. Horton stayed on that nest. He held his head high and he threw out his chest. And he looked at the hunters as much as to say, shoot if you must, but I won't run away. I meant what I said, and I said what I meant. An elephant's faithful 100%. The hunters do not shoot him. Instead, realizing the rarity of an elephant sitting on an egg, on a nest, in a tree, they capture him instead. They force him to endure a terrible trip across mountain and sea, and finally sell him to a traveling circus. The circus eventually ends up near Maisie's new Palm Beach residence. By chance, she visits the circus just as the egg is due to hatch and demands that Horton should return it. But at that very instant, the egg burst apart, and out of the pieces of red and white shell from the egg that he'd sat on so long and so well, Horton the elephant saw something whiz. It had ears and a tail and a trunk just like his. It was an elephant bird, and Horton returns to the jungle with the baby. And it should be like that, because Horton was faithful. He sat and he sat. He meant what he said, and he said what he meant, and they sent him home happy, 100%. In early 1940, Dr. Seuss, aka Theodore Geisel, left a window in his studio open. The wind caught some of his papers and blew a sketch of an elephant on top of a sketch of a tree. Through the thin, transparent paper, it looked as if the elephant was up in the tree. Thus began the story of Horton and the egg. Nothing too deep there. But in the years since, the story has been used to many varied purposes. It has been used to laud the virtue of persistence over quitting. It's been used by Christian preachers to tout the importance of remaining faithful to Christian doctrine. It's even used by anti-abortion folk to further their agenda. But if repetition means anything, the main point of the story would be to always mean what you say and say what you mean. Why is this such a novel idea? In daily interactions, we frequently say things we don't mean, in the interest of social niceties and being polite. Hi, how are you? Fine, thanks. You? I've said that on days when I was stressed beyond what I thought I could handle. When I had walking pneumonia, even the day after my mother died. I didn't really mean it. It was a reflexive response rather than a truthful one. Certainly in the political climate of the past year and a half, truthfulness has taken an especially hard hit. Public officials say opposite things at different times, and their followers are seemingly not disturbed by this. In fact, when particularly outrageous remarks are quoted, they may say, well, he really didn't mean it, as if saying things you don't mean is a good thing. We as a nation have been asked to accept the idea of alternative facts. But even as far back as 2005, Stephen Colbert made the term truthiness the word of the year. It was used to describe believing that a statement is true based on intuition or perception, without regard to evidence, logic, or facts. Then there are true statements that are meant to, well, misrepresent. When I had my first dog, a female, I used to tell her, "You're the best dog I've ever had." After she was gone, we got Mikey, and I'd tell him, "You're the best boy dog I've ever had." And then when Teddy came along, I told him, "You're the best big boy dog I've ever had," while changing Mikey's compliment to the best little boy dog, and on and on. Our current dog, Jake, hears, "You're the best little brown and gray boy dog I've ever had." My statements to my dogs were all technically true, but designed to give an impression of the dog in question being far and above any other dog I've ever had. Another example of misrepresentation is food packaging. A whole grain loaf of bread may have a small amount of whole wheat flour in it, but lots of bleached white flour, high fructose corn syrup, and other additives. The label is technically true, but meant to misrepresent. As are many designations and awards that appear in advertising. A business may be recognized as the best this or the most that, but what's not mentioned is that only those that pay big bucks to be considered for the designation are included. It would be as if we advertised our church as the largest and most active Unitarian Universalist church in the entire Quad Cities. True, but quite easy to achieve since we're the only new church in the Quad Cities proper. Spin is another way of messing with the truth. A definition I found of spin is this. In public relations and politics, spin is a form of propaganda, achieved through providing a biased interpretation of an event to persuade public opinion in favor or against some organization or public figure. Corporations, politicians, and governments hire PR folks whose entire job is to put a positive spin on even the most damning developments and revelations. In the corporate world, jargon is another tool that allows individuals to avoid communicating in a clear and specific manner. We don't call or email other departments anymore. We reach out to them. We don't investigate a problem or mistake. We drill down. Jargon is vague, imprecise, and leaves lots of wiggle room in its meaning. Why do we use these approaches? Why do we not simply say what we mean and mean what we say, as Horton did? Sometimes the intention is to deceive, but often motivation is more nebulous. We may want to avoid angering or upsetting others. Do these pants make my butt look big? We don't want to risk offending. Or we may want to avoid deeper social interaction, so we follow the patterns of social niceties and respond as expected. We may intend to be vague to avoid being pinned down or held responsible for our words and actions. The more we are clear and specific in our communications, the less we are able to wiggle out of what we said at a later date. Sometimes we simply don't stop and think before we speak. I have a friend in the congregation who, when asked a sensitive question, does the following. When she responds, if she does, it's in a thoughtful manner. Which brings us to the question, how might our world be different if we meant what we all said and said what we meant? A political climate without misleading one another, where we could trust, no posturing, honesty, and integrity in human relations. Jessa Munyon, a wellness practitioner and blogger of the Baha'i faith, wrote the following, quote, I listen for the tone of truth as a spiritual practice. Truthfulness doesn't seem so nuanced to me the first time I considered it, until I started to listen to myself. I soon noticed how often I didn't really mean what I was saying in many conversations all day long. The more attention I pay to this, the less idle talk I find myself engaging in. Now I speak less, but with more meaning, which makes me feel confident and content. Being trustworthy, then, can become a transformative spiritual practice that will create noticeable change in your ability to accomplish goals, have fulfilling relationships, and enhance your inner well-being. In the second reflection, I'll attempt to explore a little more about trustworthiness and integrity. But for now, I will try to segue to the offertory in an honest and forthright manner. We're going to take up a collection now. Many folks here make an annual pledge to the church. That's the biggest part of how we afford our bills. But we also take up a collection. Half of it helps with the budget. The other half goes to a local nonprofit. This month it's Quad Cities Interfaith. Read more about what they do on the front of your order of service. But we don't want this time to be all about money, so we also invite anyone to come up and light a candle to represent a joy or sorrow in your personal life. And we'll have beautiful music at the same time. Let's get on with it. Our second reading is not from Green Eggs and Ham, as the word of service says. It's from Horton Hatches the Egg and from some other sources. From Horton, when Maisie first asks Horton to sit on her egg. "I can't," said the elephant. "Please," begged the bird. "I won't be gone long, sir. I give you my word. I'll hurry right back. Why, I'll never be missed." "Very well," said the elephant, "since you insist. You want a vacation? Go fly off and take it. I'll sit on your egg, and I'll try not to break it. I'll stay and be faithful. I mean what I say." "Toodaloo," sang out Maisie and fluttered away. From Ralph Waldo Emerson. "What you do speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say." And from the Greek Stoic philosopher Epictetus. "First, learn the meaning of what you say, and then speak." So I had a second reflection planned, and I trashed the whole thing, given the events of this weekend. Felt like we needed to acknowledge and weave in all that's been happening in Virginia. So if this jumps around a little, I apologize. In the story of Horton, both the elephant and Maisie the bird give their word. Horton keeps his, but the bird doesn't. Does she lie willingly? Or did she mean to return as promised and then get carried away with her new freedom? Either way, Maisie was lacking in integrity. Sometimes we speak, but don't know at the time the full implication of our words. When Horton agreed to care for the egg, he was anticipating a short babysitting stint. Instead, he suffered loneliness, weather extremes, ridicule, kidnapping, and indentured servitude. There are many points in the story where Horton could have bailed, and none of us would have blamed him. It wasn't what he signed up for. Not only did Horton follow through with what he promised, he completely lived a life of integrity. 4 years after hatching the egg, Horton appeared in another book in which he heard a voice from a speck of dust, and again stood up to ridicule and rejection to ultimately save the entire town of Whoville, which was contained within that speck of dust. And that story is the context for the song that Marty and Saul shared with us. UU minister Amy Russell describes integrity as congruence between what we believe, who we think we are, and how we live. I'd add that integrity includes congruence between what we say and what we do. While we have no creed, as UUs, we agree to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relationships, and the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. We couldn't have fully anticipated the events of the recent election cycle, or those of this weekend in Charlottesville, Virginia. And yet we've witnessed how hate speech, jargon, exaggeration, and alternative facts have fueled anger, resentment, and ultimately violence. Those individuals attending the counter-protest in Virginia yesterday may not have fully known the risk they were taking when they showed up to counter the hate of the white supremacist groups that were marching. But they had witnessed the growing tensions of the past year or so, and had seen the violence that broke out the night before. They showed up anyway. And many were injured, one lost her life, and many, many more were traumatized. When I say I believe in social justice and the equality of all people, when I agreed that Black Lives Matter and I was ready to march, I was ready to speak out when I heard others make racist comments in my presence. What I didn't anticipate was the work I'd have to do confronting my own privilege as a white woman. I wasn't naive enough to think it would be all kumbaya, but I didn't expect the tension, the uncomfortable and difficult conversations and social media posts between friends as we whites struggle to understand more deeply the effects of racism in our society. Maybe it's a good thing we don't know the full implications of our words from the get-go. If Horton had known he'd face not just rain and snow and ridicule, but guns and imprisonment to stay with that egg, he may not ever have agreed in the first place. If we waited, as Epictetus suggested in the reading, to learn the full meaning of what we say before we speak, we might never open our mouths again. We can't know the full experience of the journey when we step on the trail. It's significant that Horton's phrase, "I meant what I said and I said what I meant," were repeated throughout the story. Horton didn't just make one decision to follow through on his commitment. He made many. When it was raining, he decided to stay. When the snow and ice came, he decided again. And again when ridiculed, and again when captured, and on and on. These are scary times. We need to communicate with one another as honestly and clearly as we can, without spin, without jargon or hyperbole. We need to consider the implications of our words, our promises, our principles as you use. We don't fully know where they may lead, and we may need to decide again and again to remain faithful to them as the going gets tougher and tougher. The one thing Horton didn't have going for him that we do is the support of community in our efforts. We stand together, supporting and, yes, uncomfortably challenging one another as we strive to remain faithful to our words and ideals, as we strive to mean what we say and say what we mean. We ultimately may not be 100% successful as Horton was, but we continue on together through the tumult and the strife, singing as we go.